So, on one of my previous videos, Berserk's Hidden Message, one of my viewers left the following comment about what they learned from Berserk. Of course, this person might have been a troll, and I probably shouldn't even think much of it, but nevertheless, this comment still got me thinking. On one hand, I think that I can kind of see why someone might take this type of lesson away from Berserk. After all, Berserk does have one of the bleakest and darkest portrayals of human nature, and it includes the most brutal and shocking betrayal in all of manga and anime. Additionally, I can personally relate to this type of idea. Just like many others, I have experienced my own share of betrayal in my own life, and I have previously been to a place where I vowed to never trust anyone again. However, on the other hand, this comment made me think, did this person even read all of Berserk? Because while yes, Guts does get his fair share of backstabs, and while he does constantly get the short end of the stick, there is a specific reason why Guts goes through this transition. This reason only manifests itself in the second half of the story, and I truly believe that Berserk's simple lesson about friendship is one of the most touching and realistic ones I have ever come across in any type of story. The ironic thing is that another completely unrelated comment written by another one of my viewers in a completely different post perfectly put into words this main lesson about friendship, and I couldn't have said it any better myself. But I am not going to reveal this comment just yet. Additionally, there is an overlooked parallel between both Guts and Griffith where they both go through a similar mystifying experience at different times in the story, which even further promotes this type of message. Along his long, hard, brutal journey, Guts had crossed paths with countless people, and while many monsters had gone against him, there were a select few who got past his hard shell and influenced Guts to be the better version of himself, which we saw in the final chapter. So again, as we all know, Guts has his fair share of bad experiences with people during his adolescence, and we completely understand why he has such a negative, untrustful attitude towards other people. The only father-like figure in his life admitted to him that he had sold him off to Donovan to be raped, and in Springflower of Distant Days, we see a flashback where Gambino told him to not depend on others, no matter what. These traumatic events were the cause of Guts' "don't touch me" phase, where he never opened up to anyone else and pushed everyone away. This all changes for Guts when he meets Griffith and joins the band of the Hawk. Through the band, he finally feels a sense of belonging, appreciation and connection, something he never truly had in the previous phase of his life. However, after being betrayed by Griffith, the exact person he looked up to the most, all the people he had finally built a bond with, were killed during the eclipse. This is when Guts envelops into the Black Swordsman persona, and his hate and distrust upon the world goes to an all-time high, and he reverts back to his "don't touch me" phase. However, there is an important difference in why he comes to this mindset. During his childhood, the reason why he pushed people away was from the simple fact that everyone in his life was some type of a constant, who always sought to take advantage of him. There really wasn't anyone who he could trust in the first place. However, after the eclipse, after experiencing what having a real connection with someone felt like, and having it taken all away, his reasoning for pushing people away completely changes. Guts pushes people away because for him, not even having anyone else to rely on is better than risking himself to the brutal pain of betrayal. So again, this type of mindset is what leads Guts to be in his most hateful, edgy state in the whole story during his Black Swordsman phase. If someone stopped reading Berserk right at this point in the story, it will be easy to take away that the lesson of Berserk is to not trust anyone. However, this is only the first third of the story, and again, there is a specific reason why the story is structured in this way so that it emphasizes betrayal and distrust so much. Since you have probably been wondering since the start of the video, I will reveal what the aforementioned comment stated. I will show off the whole comment at the end of the video, but in short, it stated that the story of Berserk and Guts' journey proved that being betrayed or deceived multiple times is worth it if you end up finding someone who won't. I really couldn't find any better words to say this, and at the same time, it's so true. The fact is, Guts' unluckiness with people does come to an end. He in fact does meet people again who genuinely care about him. There is one character who was able to get past Guts' iron walls, and was vital in the progression for Guts to be the person he is in the latest chapter, and this character is Puck. Now, Puck's importance certainly does stagnate in the latter half of the story, but in the former half, his role and impact on the story is undeniable. What's most obvious is that through his comedic and humorous outlook on everything, Puck was able to mellow out the completely stern and hard personality Guts had at this time. But even more importantly, the characteristic he exhibited which made the biggest impact upon Guts' psychology was Puck's sense of justice. Unlike a lot of the other people Guts had previously met in his life, Puck was someone who had a genuine sense of right and wrong, and despite his obvious powerlessness, he still actively did what he could to try and prove what was right. This was also something which was shown over and over again through the Black Swordsman and Lost Children arcs. One instance this was shown was during Vargas' public execution. Right before this took place, Puck had sympathized with Vargas in the way his whole family had been eaten by the Count, and he felt sorry for the old crippled man. As he and Guts watched Vargas get placed on the platform, even though he knew he couldn't do anything really impactful. To Guts' complete surprise, Puck charges headfirst towards the executioner. He obviously isn't able to do anything, but the action nevertheless proved that Puck's sense of justice was stronger than his desire to just stand there and observe what he thought was wrong. This action also went against Guts' notion that all elves are weak. This was just one of the many instances where Puck displayed the side of himself. He showed empathy towards Teresia in the following chapter, and he consoled Jill all throughout Lost Children. I could go on and on. While his comedic antics definitely did loosen up the tight walls Guts had pulled up, it was ultimately this justful side of him which was most important towards the Black Swordsman. When Guts does finally accept Puck, he simply states that he's worth keeping because he has the ability to heal his wounds, so he has some medicinal value. But you know, that's a complete lie. The real medicinal value Puck had towards Guts was in the way he prevented the swordsman's psyche from being completely enveloped into the darkness. This initial connection with Puck is what ultimately leads Guts to accept even more people, and the next 4 people who joins Guts' group are Isidro, Fani, Serpico and Shirke. And halfway into the Millennium Falcon arc, this transformation of Guts results in one of the greatest, most satisfying payoffs in the whole story. After finally taking back Casca during the Conviction arc and setting the new goal of reaching Elfhelm, for the first time, Guts becomes responsible for the life of someone else. However, due to the Beast of Darkness still lurking around, he cannot even trust himself from refraining from hurting Casca, and this pushes her even further away, and arguably, it puts him at his lowest point since the eclipse. Although the reason why Guts chooses to accept Fani's request to follow him appears to be him just being like, whatever, the real reason why he accepts them is that he now understands that he cannot look over Casca by himself. He knows that he has the capacity to spiral out of control and really harm her. He directly narrates that if he was alone, he would have refused them outright, but that for the first time, he's counting on complete strangers for help. And interestingly enough, he states that he had never felt so powerless before. This sounds strange at first, because you know, Guts is like the most Chad, superhuman swordsman ever. But during the brief time that it was only him and Puck looking after Casca, he realized that even though he had all that superhuman power, he still lacked the ability to properly look after her. There was only so much that Guts could do all by himself, and it had finally hit a breaking point. It was in this scene where he admitted to his own shortcomings, and that he simply couldn't do everything by himself. Therefore, he makes the conscious choice to rely on others. And this decision for Guts to accept his new teammates is perhaps one of the most important decisions made by Guts in the whole story. While every single arc in Berserk had one central purpose, such as the Black Swordsman arc introducing the reader to Guts and establishing questions, the Golden Age arc representing the binary views on ambitions, and the Conviction arc epitomizing Guts' own personal character arc. From my viewpoint, the Millennium Falcon arc's core idea was about Guts finally abandoning Gambino's lesson from his childhood, and finally learning that he did in fact need to depend on other people. In this regard, it is often overlooked just how important the Enoch Village saga was towards Guts' growth. The new group worked together to defend the village from the vicious troll attacks, and through these acts of teamwork, Guts finally grasps something which had been missing in his life for a long time. And this portion of the story includes the exact moment Guts realized something which shaped how he acted for the rest of the journey. And boy, is that scene beautiful. Seriously, every member of this new group plays an important role in the saga. Shirke uses her magic to shield a barrier and fend off all the trolls. Serpico fights alongside Guts against the Kelpie as Guts goes against the ogre, and later on, he directly orders Isidro in charge of fighting in the rear guard and to protect the kidnapped woman, and he even gives him this badass speech to show him that he's up to the job. Even Fani, who barely even fought using her own hands, plays a vital role. It was only thanks to her that Casca managed to stay alive during the flood. And when Guts rescues the two in the cave, he tells her that the things she does are a big help, and that he's grateful. When the group finally get rid of all the trolls and succeed in their mission, one of the most memorable and essential moments in Guts' entire journey takes place. He looks over at his new team. Just as a side note, I just want to talk about how underrated and beautiful this panel is. It's only one panel, but it represents each member of the group so perfectly. I just love Berserk so much. Anyway, the sight of the group, with each member having completely different personalities and characteristics, reminds Guts of his previous group, the Band of the Hawk. Without realizing it, he had formed a new group of companions, and more importantly, he realizes he has another chance. And this realization by Guts really culminates and represents itself during the famous beach scene. After obtaining the Berserker armor and fending off Grunbeld, and after Shirke had officially joined the group after Flora's death, Guts finally reconciles all the recent ordeals which took place, and he finally realizes how much he needs the people he has now. Reflecting on the way he had been saved by Shirke from being completely consumed by the Berserker armor when he first wore it, Guts tells the young witch that in case he goes berserk in battle again, he's got himself a reliable magic user. He looks over at the new group and says, "This is nice. I thought never again. Never could I. Watch the sunset and be this calm. Never again could I sleep the night through." When Kintaro Miura wrote this page, I bet he intentionally left out one massively important piece of dialogue. There was one other, even more important thing he never thought he will see again, and that is Casca smiling again. Right when Guts was at his lowest point, not being able to look after Casca properly, he asked himself, when was the last time Casca smiled? And here, in this scene, after finally relying and depending on others, he was able to see his lover smile again. As mentioned earlier, this was the scene in which Guts had finally reconciled the fact that he needed other people. He had tried to look after Casca by himself, but to no avail, so he finally gave in and abandoned his principle of not relying on others. And this was perhaps the most pivotal decision Guts had made, and in this scene, he recognized that it had all paid off. Additionally, there is an often overlooked parallel in the way the two most important characters in Berserk, Guts and Griffith, are literally saved by their friendship, which further promotes this message. In completely different parts of the story, it is shown that the only thing which retained the two characters' sanity and consciousness during their darkest times was the existence of their respective friends. In Griffith's case, this was shown during the Golden Age arc when he was jailed in the Tower of Rebirth for sleeping with Princess Charlotte. During the year he was locked up and tortured brutally, the one thought which retained his sanity wasn't his accomplishments or his dream. It was the sole thought of Guts. Above everything else, the one thing which refrained him from going insane was the thought of his most valuable troop. Even Griffith himself wonders why Guts seems to control his mind so much. In Guts' case, this is more directly and literally shown off. After the eclipse, as killing Griffith becomes the main motive for his life, in parallel to how Griffith had been taken over by his dream, Guts slowly succumbs to insanity as he gets more and more haunted by his desire to kill his former leader. However, as shown earlier, the one person who prevented Guts from completely losing himself was Puck, and later on in the story, this is further represented through the Berserker armor. As Guts wears the deadly armor which had killed its previous user, the person who prevents him from being completely devoured by the armor is Shirke. The one thing which prevented the two from completely losing themselves was the presence of their most important people. This shows that the narrative and cyclical structure of Berserk also promotes this idea that we in fact do need other people. Both Guts' personal journey and the structure of Berserk extensively promotes this message that being betrayed multiple times is worth it if you end up finding someone who won't. By the end of the Millennium Falcon arc, Guts finally accepts that he does need to depend on other people. Contrary to what he did as a child and during his Black Swordsman phase, he completely eschews from Gambino's lesson about the battlefield on every level.